No. Susie, okay to start? Okay, good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. So, in the order of business today, the first thing that we have to do is wish Melinda and Bridget happy birthday. So let's sing happy birthday, and then I'm going to ask them to come up so I can give them a birthday blessing. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Melinda and Bridget. Happy birthday to you. Very nice. Now, can you come up? About right here. Did you bring your sword? Am I on camera? Can they see me at home? Yes, absolutely. Okay, that's important, because they get upset. Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'kunecha Yisa Adonai panav elecha Yasem lecha shalom. The Lord bless you and protect you. The Lord lift up his face upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his face upon you and give you peace and health and happiness and many more birthdays. And we say, Amen.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Simin Tov, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov, Simin Tov, Yahelanu, 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 U'lako Yisrael, Yahelanu, Yahelanu, U'lako Yisrael, Yahelanu, Yahelanu, U'lako Yisrael. One more. Yahelanu, Yahelanu, U'lako Yisrael. Very nice, very nice, very nice. Okay, before we go to South America today, I would like to poll all of you. So, today we are supposed to be starting our second semester. And one of the things that I had talked to Rosalie and Susie about is teaching Jewish theology in the second semester. And I want to ask all of you how you feel about this. Do you want to continue with the diaspora communities right now? Or shall we make a switch to theology? The reason why I want to teach theology is because adult Jews, children we understand, but adult Jews basically know nothing about Jewish theology. You know nothing about what you believe. You really don't. So if I asked you, what happens when we die? Judaism offers three choices, and you could choose any of the three. Or if I ask you, what do we believe about God? The standard answer I get is God is one and it's not Jesus. Okay, that's really a very, I get why, but it's a juvenile answer. As adults, we should know what we believe in. And it's not your fault. No one ever taught you. We don't teach this material. Rabbis don't teach it. I do every single Shabbat. I always pick something theological. But 99% of rabbis don't teach it. And so how would you ever know unless you take a class? So I am absolutely happy to keep going with diaspora communities. If you want to make a change and start learning about what we believe as Jews, what our tradition teaches, I would love to do that too, or we could delay that and do it in the fall, God willing, we still meet. I mean, I'm very open at this point. So by a show of hands, how many people would like to continue with diaspora instead of going to theology? Okay. How many people would like to move on and start theology? And then we could continue with diaspora next fall if you want. I mean, I'm totally open. Those of you online, could you please text Susie and let her know how you feel about this, and then we will figure out what we're going to do. Say that again, Susie. Say again. In the chat. Text Susie in the chat if you would prefer to stay with diaspora communities or move along into theology. And we could always come back and do more at any time. So it's entirely up to you. My passion, what I'm getting my doctorate in, is theology. I also love history, Jewish history. All history, but I love Jewish history. But theology is like my favorite thing in the world to talk about. I'm a rabbi. Well, she says, Evie says, you're a rabbi. That's what it's supposed to be. Well, yes, but lots of rabbis don't talk about it. You know, it was very interesting because when I do funerals, and I do many funerals for people I don't know. And always my comments have to do with God. And I had one person who attended the funeral come up to me the other day and said, you know, it's so nice to hear a rabbi finally talk about God. And all the funerals we've been to, nobody ever talks about God. For me, it's like, well, how do you do that? How do you do a funeral? How is God not in the equation? How is God ever not in the equation? Somewhere God is always. Anyway, okay, enough said on that. We'll figure out, Susie will let me know, and we'll figure out what we're doing starting next week. All right, today, say again, Evie, yes. Pale of Settlement, yes. I understand. So Evie says that last week when we went through the Pale of Settlement, there was so much there that she didn't know. It's not that she doesn't want to do theology. She just, you know what it is? We all want to know everything about everything. and as we go through, you know, I keep reviewing and referring back to events that occur so that we always have in mind what's going on in the world, what happened, these kinds of things.
We've been thrown out of every country. Right?
We've been thrown out of every country.
What we're doing regularly is another country that threw us out, another country that threw us out.
So Eileen says that, so what we're doing is one country threw us out, and another country threw us out, and another country threw us out. Well, that's mostly the case. Mostly the case. So, look, you know, we have been a hated and persecuted people since the beginning. And yet we're still here. And if people took the time to really understand what Judaism teaches, they would understand, well, why do I hate these people? Why would I ever hate these people? You know, our Christianity gets a very strong reputation as a religion that is based on love. And that's true. That is true. There are people who would describe the essence of Christianity as love, the essence of Jesus as love. And that's true for the most part. But to say that Judaism is not a religion of love is wrong. Judaism is a religion of other things as well. God in our religion is not love. Absolutely not. Some people could say in Christianity God is love. That it's not precisely correct, but people can say it. But to say that the Jewish God is love is totally incorrect. God can show great love in our tradition, and God does show great love in Jewish tradition. God also gets really mad. God is also unhappy and jealous and other things. So in our tradition, you know, it's kind of a cliche, but sometimes God says no. That is true. Sometimes God says no, not now, not ever. There are some things that God simply does not approve of, ever. Christianity and Judaism share a number of things. Clearly, because Christianity came out of Judaism, and Jesus' teachings were thoroughly Jewish. He was a Jewish teacher, a Jewish rabbi, teaching Jews. And then at some point, that changes. Paul reworks Jesus' teachings into a consistent theology that is now called Christianity. Okay, so having said that, yes, we are thrown out of everywhere because people don't understand Judaism. Okay, let's go to Suriname. Okay, the first thing you're going to see is that it looks like Suriname. That's the name. But it's pronounced Suriname. And it is located at the north, slightly east tip of South America. So we're in South America. You see Brazil underneath it. And Suriname has been fought over by the Dutch and the English in all of its early history. You know, the Dutch and the English explorers, and also the French explorers, they went around the world and they started amassing colonies. And Suriname was one of those colonies. The French landed there, the Dutch landed there, the English landed there. The Dutch establish a colony, the English establish a colony, the English want it, the Dutch want it. And so it gets kind of fought over, in a way, for a number of years. To let you know who wins, at the present moment, Dutch is what is spoken in Suriname. That is the language of the country. It's Dutch. As well as some, what they call Creole, indigenous languages. Okay, so in 1639, England is mostly in charge of Suriname, and they allowed Jews from the Netherlands, from Portugal and Italy to settle there. Okay, Jews from the Netherlands, let's think about this for a second. Jews from the Netherlands, from Portugal and Italy. So what kind of Jews are these? Are they Sephardic or Ashkenazic? Mostly Sephardic, right? Some Ashkenazic, because the Netherlands, you'll recall, is home to a number of different kinds of Jews. The Jews who go to the Netherlands, some are kicked out of England, some are kicked out of France. We talked about that last week, the expulsions from England and France. The Jews in England and France aren't Sephardic Jews, right? So there's some Ashkenazic Jews there. And then the Jews who come over from Portugal and Spain after the Inquisition are Sephardic Jews, mostly conversos. And you'll recall many of them go to Amsterdam. And Amsterdam was called the New Jerusalem because there were so many Jews who were going to Amsterdam. And you'll also recall from our previous classes that these converso Jews get to Amsterdam and they meet the population of Jews that is in Amsterdam, and the population in Amsterdam feels how about the conversos? Welcoming or not welcoming? Okay. Welcoming in the sense that, okay, you're here. Not welcoming in the sense that, why are you here? You know nothing about Judaism. These conversos had come over, and they didn't, they knew you light candles on a Friday night. They didn't know why, you didn't know what brachot to say, nothing. Just, okay, we light candles on a Friday night, we maybe do something at some other time. But they didn't know about Judaism. And so the communities in Amsterdam thought, oh, God, we got to teach these people everything. They know nothing. Okay? And so there was a large population of both Sephardic and Ashkenazic Jews in the Netherlands. We know in Portugal, clearly, those were Sephardic Jews. In Italy, those were Sephardic Jews. All right. They go and they settle in Suriname.
Rabbi,
Yes?
I'd like to point out.
Take this one as the lower thing.
I'd like to point out that back in history, what is now the Netherlands were part of the Spanish Empire, and Jews from Spain did settle, trying to get away from the Inquisition in what is now the Netherlands.
Yep. Thank you. I kind of like on it. Okay. He said that Jews from Spain had settled there earlier, fleeing the Inquisition. Yes, that's correct. So the Dutch explorers found other places on the north coast, including Dutch Guiana. The Dutch end up keeping Suriname. We'll talk about that in a minute, even though the English have it right now. And there's a deal that's made that between the Dutch and the English, that the Dutch keep Suriname and the English keep New Amsterdam. New Amsterdam is what? New York. Very good. So early on. Now, the Dutch had it, clearly. Peter Stuyvesant, we have the whole, that whole idea. But the English keep New Amsterdam, and in return, the Dutch keep Suriname. And Suriname is named for a river that runs right down the center of the country called the Suriname River. All right. So what were Jews doing when they went to Suriname? There was a very big tobacco industry. And it was in a settlement that was called Marshall's Creek. So Jews were on plantations, and they were buying and selling tobacco. The first ketubah that we know of is 1643. 1643. Eventually, Marshall's Creek gets abandoned. Now, we're going to talk about that in a second because it has a lot to do with slavery. In 1652, near the capital of Torre Rica. Torre Rica is right in the basically center, slightly north, slightly east. There is a lot of immigration from the Brazilian, what do you call it? Brazil is divided into, having a senior moment, divided into little areas. And Pernambuco had a number of Jews, and they immigrated to Suriname and brought over expertise in sugarcane. And they had used in Brazil and now also in Suriname slave labor. Remember that, we think sort of in our tradition, oh, no, we didn't do that. No, Jews would never have slaves. We're way above that. We would never do such terrible things to people. Well, remember, slavery is not prohibited in the Bible. It is not prohibited in the Bible. And one of the things that differentiated northern Jews from Southern Jews during our American Civil War is that Southern Jews owned slaves. Not all, some Southern Jews, good point. Some Southern Jews owned slaves. Why is slavery not prohibited in the Bible? Well, we were slaves in Egypt. You would think then that we wouldn't own slaves.
Weren't they in the Bible, though, more like indentured servants?
Good. So we have two kinds of, so Joette says, weren't they more like indentured servants? Good comment. So we have two kinds of slaves, biblically. We have slaves that we enslave from other countries, other ethnicities, other countries, and then we have Jewish slaves. The slaves that we enslave from other countries, that's one category, and that's fine. And then we have the issue of Jewish slaves. So when Jews enslave other Jews, Joette is correct, absolutely correct, when she says that happened in the Bible because Jews had, a Jew owes a large debt to another Jew, and he or she can't pay it off. What do? What you do is you place yourself in indentured servitude to the person to whom you owe money for a specific amount of time, and you work off your debt. That was not true of foreign slaves, but it was true of Jewish slaves. And there's a provision biblically that if you are a Jewish slave and you are an indentured servant, and let's say you pledge yourself for, 7 years. Let's just pick a number. 7 years. And at the end of 7 years, you decide, you know what, I'm better off here as an indentured servant than I am free in the outside world. That's not a ridiculous possibility. You could be totally impoverished in the outside world, no place to live, nothing to eat. And if you're an indentured servant, your Jewish slave owner, by Jewish law, is treating you decently. You have Shabbat off, you're getting your meals. Biblically, halakhically, Jewishly, law, it says you have to treat your Jewish indentured servant decently. And so some Jews decided, apparently, to stay indefinitely as indentured servant. You pierced your ear, and that identified you as property of this slave owner. Okay. That shouldn't be that shouldn't be so far-fetched for us to believe that that could happen. In the same way, kind of in the same way, a woman, a virgin who is raped in the ancient world, horrific, horrific, horrific crime, but she is 99.9% better off to marry her rapist than she is to go back out into the world. Why? Because in the ancient world, she is now damaged property. Her worth is much, much less than when she was a virgin, and she is not protected. So it was better for her to marry her rapist and have a husband who would protect her and take care of her. Remember, if you rape a woman in the ancient world, remember the rule is you must take care of them. You may not divorce them. You have to feed them. You have to buy them clothes. They have to be taken care of. If she goes back out into the world, she's an outcast. She has nothing. Her parents look at her as less than. Everybody looks at her as less than. So it is a terrible thing for us to imagine in 2025 that she would be better off marrying her rapist, but it in fact was the case. All right, so you could be an indentured servant. And these Jews who came from Pernambuco brought expertise in sugarcane harvesting and growing, as well as they brought the slave labor into Suriname. And there was an association between the sugarcane industry and the Dutch West India Company in Dutch Brazil. So there was already a built-in trading opportunity for these Jews when they went to Suriname. This was even before the Inquisition that Jews had fled Brazil and brought knowledge to Suriname. In 1664, there's another wave of immigration after the expulsion from Recife and French Guiana. So who conquers Recife? Recife is conquered by the Portuguese. It was Dutch. It was conquered by the Portuguese. And they also conquered French Guiana. And what did the Portuguese then do to Recife? They brought the Inquisition to Recife, Brazil. Jews fled so they wouldn't be caught up in the Inquisition. Now, just for a second, let's remember, whom did the Inquisition go after? Good. The Inquisition did not necessarily go after Jews. Why? Because Jews were already labeled as heretics. They were expelled from Spain, they were expelled from Portugal, and they were labeled heretics. The Inquisition went after Jews who had professed that they had converted to Christianity. Because what was the purpose of the Inquisition?
Make sure that they were true Christians.
To make sure they were true Christians. What was the purpose of the Inquisition in general? To steal their money, that's true. There was ulterior motives there, that's true. But they wanted everyone to be practicing Christianity the way the Pope had decided Christianity should be practiced. So the Inquisition happens in 1492, right? Now let's think for a second. 8 years later, 1500, okay? My opinion, 1500 is a huge, huge turning point in world history and Jewish everywhere else. What happens in what's going on in 1500? Crusades, Magellan, Islam. 1500, the printing press. 1500, the Renaissance in Europe. 1500, the Kabbalah. 1500 is a date of great change in Europe, and the earthquake that shakes Europe. 1500 is the Protestant Revolution and Reformation. The Protestant Reformation begins in 1500. So you have all of these huge events going on, which is why for me 1500 kind of, yes, it's the Middle Ages, but it kind of begins early modern history, because everything changes in 1500. The world changes in 1500. Okay. So in 1664, 164 years later, another wave of immigration comes, the expulsion from Recife, and so the church then is very concerned with the advent of Protestantism, right? They're very concerned with with Christian Catholics, as opposed to Christian Protestants, practicing Christianity the way the Pope wants. So Suriname then becomes a very, very important center for Jews, right? They weren't welcome in Recife. They weren't welcome in lots of other countries because of the Inquisition. Suriname was English. The Inquisition was not there, so Jews were safe there. One of the few places that Jews were safe. So they go, and they were planters, and they were slaveholders. All right. In 1665, the English finally grant the Jews freedom of religion, the right to build their synagogues and schools, and total, complete, independent courts. So little known fact, at that point, 1665, Suriname is the only country on the planet with complete Jewish autonomy prior to Israel in 1948, prior to the establishment of the State of Israel. The Dutch take over in 1667. So it had been Dutch, English, with a lot of English, a lot of English, a lot of English. Now it's Dutch. Because remember, as I told you, the Dutch sort of trade the English. Okay, you take New Amsterdam, we get Suriname. In the 18th century, the plantation economy fails. What's going on in the 18th century? When is the Industrial Revolution?
The American Revolution takes place.
American Revolution.
And with a lot of new ideas.
Not of new ideas. French Revolution, good. When is the Industrial Revolution?
Just later.
Yes, so the Industrial Revolution is a little bit later. Thank you. I just wanted for us to have context of what's going on. In the late 18th century, in the late 18th century, yes, the late 1700s, the plantation economy begins to fail. That's how Jews were making their money. That's how Jews were working. So now you have this Jewish population of Suriname, and their means of livelihood is not doing very well at all. So what do? They weren't selling the sugar cane, they weren't selling the tobacco, which had been earlier. The Jews of Suriname began to intermarry, both with non-Jews as well as Ashkenazim marrying Sephardim and Sephardim marrying Ashkenazim. And over time, those two cultures blend. So by 1999, there wasn't Ashkenazim and Sephardim, there were Jews who were kind of Ashkenazic and kind of Sephardic. So there's a phenomenon that appears in Suriname that we really haven't talked very much about in any of the other countries. And that is the introduction of black Jews. Okay, where were there black Jews?
In Africa. There was a Jewish tribe in Africa for years.
Okay, so Zisel says in Africa. There was a Jewish tribe in Africa for years. Well, good. Yes, Evie says slaves. Yes, this is true. So yes, we know of one or two tribes in Africa who have claimed Jewish lineage, especially the Lemda. Yes, we talked about them. But most of the black Jews end up becoming black Jews because they were slaves first. And then they were converted by their Jewish slave owners. This happened a lot in the Caribbean. Suriname is often grouped with Caribbean countries. So there were a number of Jews, both in the Caribbean and in Suriname as well, who were Africans, brought over as slaves, and ultimately converted by their Jewish slave owners into Judaism. So you had a fairly substantial portion of Suriname's Jews over time as black Jews. It was very, very important to the continuation of Judaism on Suriname. In fact, there are a number of records of circumcision of black slaves after they have been converted. By 1799, 1800, many black Jews were Jews from birth. So their parents and grandparents had been converted before them, obviously, and now they were born Jewish. But they were never regarded in a positive way from white Jews. White Jews always discriminated against them and said they were less than. In 1759, these black Jews formed their own organization, and it was called the Path of Righteousness. And it was a black group. They had a black synagogue. They were their own sort of ethnic sub-minority of Jews. In 1817, they disbanded, and the remaining people who had belonged to the Path of Righteousness, these black Jews, were absorbed into the two white synagogues on Suriname at that time. And at that time, it was estimated that about 10% of Jews were non-white.
What was the population of Jews?
Coming up to it. And by 1799, many Jews had at least one African ancestor. It happened mostly that the Sephardic men, remember there had been a blending, the Sephardic men mostly, and I don't know why it was Sephardic as opposed to Ashkenazic, but it was the Sephardic men who entered into intermarriage with black women, and they produced obviously children who weren't, at least they weren't halakhically Jewish, but they were ended up being converted, and as I said, they weren't considered Jewish by the white Jews. Now we could take a guess at why it was mostly Sephardic men who intermarried with the black women. Why would that be, Joette?
In the Sephardic community, they don't really have Orthodox conservative reform.
In the Sephardic community, they don't really have Orthodox, conservative, or reform.
And their Orthodox are less strict than Ashkenazic Orthodox.
And their Orthodox are less strict than Ashkenazic Orthodox. Okay, that's a possibility. Zisel?
My perception is simply the following. The Sephardim Jews mostly came from Spain. Spain was a power. They owned slaves. They conquered what is Latin America. And the exchange of people meeting black people. And so there is the simple fact that we're all humans, and white men could have married black women, and later on, vice versa. And that's the way I think it happened.
Okay, that could be too. I also think there's the possibility that if you're from the Sephardic tradition, a number of these people were from the Converso tradition. If you were from the Converso tradition, then you or your ancestors, for sure, definitely had an experience of being Jewish but not really following Judaism. And so the idea of, well, I don't have to marry a Jew, it's not that big a deal, would be more prominent in those communities. I certainly can't say it's true for all Sephardic communities, definitely not. But for some, we hear that my great aunt, my grandmother's sister, was in love with a non-Jewish man in New York City. And her parents told her, as I'm sure many happened, you marry a non-Jewish man, you're dead to us. And so she never married her entire life. She was single her entire life. She was the most wonderful aunt. She used to take us on the subways and the buses in Central Park. She used to take us everywhere when we were tiny, tiny, tiny. Now that I'm much older, I can look at her life and say, oh, how sad. How incredibly sad. She was never able to have love in her life because she was so devoted to this one person who wasn't Jewish. That's Ashkenazic, big time. I don't know about how stringent the Sephardim are in terms of that idea. I think some Sephardim are probably a little looser in their ideas about that. These Jews who were from Sephardic men and black women, they were allowed, by the way, they were called Balados, clearly, and they were allowed to come to synagogue, but they couldn't participate in the rituals, and they had to sit in special pews. In 1841, they were finally granted full status as Jews. In the 19th and 20th centuries, some Suriname Jews started traveling north to North America. And so there are records of people, say in New York City, as well as other cities in North America, who came from Suriname. There were, at that time, 3 official synagogues in Suriname, and they were all Orthodox. Presently, there is 1 synagogue in Suriname. It began, as I just said, as an Orthodox synagogue. Today, it is a liberal synagogue. Liberal, I'm assuming that means reform. It just says liberal, that it was a liberal synagogue. The last census that was taken claimed that there were 181 Jews in Suriname. Apparently the congregation at Neve Shalom, which is the one liberal synagogue, is 130 now. So apparently there are about 130 Jews in Suriname. I don't know. They didn't bring me up to date on the. He asked, what is their profession? I don't know. I'll see if I can find that out.
In commerce.
Commerce, trade, maybe. Bankers, I mean, or not. I mean, you know, we assume, we make assumptions sometimes. That may or may not be true. I will find out. I will find out for us. Okay. At its height. You know what? I don't have that. I'll have to find that too. I'll have to find that too. Okay, Susie, what is our verdict on next week? Okay, so we'll start theology next week. And for those of you who are missing or want diaspora, we will continue at some point if that's what you'd like. We'll start theology next week. And so what we're going to talk about, theology are questions that have to do with God, basically. And we're going to talk about what do we believe about God? What I more precisely should say is, what does Judaism teach about God? What we believe is often something very, very different. But what does Judaism teach about God? What does Judaism teach about us being a chosen people? What does Judaism teach about the Torah? What does Judaism teach about human beings, our purpose, why we're here, how we were created? We'll go into a whole section on good and evil. How is it that evil exists in the world? We thought God was a good God. What? How come evil is here? Is God omnipotent? Many really important questions. And as I said, I think this is a really important class for us as adult Jews to know what our religion teaches. And then you can make informed decisions about what you believe. So I'll give you a very, very, very quick sort of one-sentence preview for next week. In almost all of the things that I have just described, Judaism offers you choices. Offers you 1, 2, sometimes 3 choices about what you want to believe in. And they're all Jewish. It just depends on which group of Jews you're asking at what point in history that you're asking them. So you have a choice in a number of different beliefs as a Jew. Okay, everyone, have a wonderful week. I'm very much looking forward to seeing you next week. We'll start new, and as I said one last time, if you are missing diaspora, we can always go back and pick it up. I'll be happy to do that. welcome.
Okay, so, Suriname has 560,000
No
people
sugar,
and
no carbs,
181.
and no flour. Do you eat peanut butter?
Yes,
Okay.
I'll try
Enjoy.
one.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
These are like my best stuff, not fattening.
I'll get a napkin.
Those are good.
He's got a napkin.
Oh, that's very,
I noticed.
those are very good.
That's all the information.
What does it say, Joanne?
Oh, okay, I'll
That there are 560,000 people in Suriname
Yes.
and 181 registered as
Yeah,
Jews.
that's what I said, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a pen?
I know, I don't quite remember where you are.
I'm right around the corner from you.
I felt so much better after talking with you.
Oh, thank you.
I started getting things together that, cost of things.
Yeah,
Water and Power sent me a thing that I used like so much more in the time that she was with me.
well, one of the things that you're going to be asked is, what was your original agreement with her? What did she agree to?
She just agreed to live there and
Okay, well, the judge then will say, well, look, you had no agreement. She didn't promise you that she would pay for anything.
well, no, the only reason that I would ask for damages, that would be the cost.
Yeah, I think the only way you get done with that, like I said, is you have to show actual damage.
Yeah.
You know, I think if, you show that little spot on the thing there, I think the judge will
No,
say,
that-
yeah, that's like normal wear and
No,
tear.
but it just hurt so much. There was glass, so if she intended to put something down, she did it deliberately.
All right.
It's just awful.
That will be hard to prove,
We'll have
that
the
she did
picture.
it on purpose.
Well, I also have a shovel that she stuck in the middle of a pipe plant. I mean, the filth in the room. Yeah, I know. But she's gonna have to be confronted.
I'll be right back. I know that you're just waiting.
We are.
We're entrenched.
See, we didn't get on the link like before last year.
In fact, there are choices.
I know that when he said he wanted to continue, I'm trying to like everything you're talking about. Someday it goes out. It goes out.
That's right. That's your hard run. That's it. We don't need to know anything else.
We know that we're going to band it and throw it higher, but now theology.
We do ourselves.
I slipped these two chairs right away. This man is usually sitting, Cecil, this guy, and I can't see. So I slipped them right away. Our chairs over, they don't even notice I did that. I got to grab it.
I did notice something I never noticed before. Took his hat off and sat on it.
He's real that. He does. Remember when he wore all green? He had that green hat. Well, it was the only other time I've seen him sit on a hat.
I've never seen anybody sit. That's why you're not supposed to put your hat on your face. It's supposed to make you sit on it.
I've had to carry a hat on your head.
That's an old, no, it's not. It's an old saying. It's an old tradition.
I'll be my turn.
One of my ladies got hysterical. It's like throwing salt up your shoulder. It's one of those things.
I don't think I'm that.
So
I don't
I
follow it.
follow my own rules. Yeah.
Here, she answers that.
My own rules.
1649, what happened? She knows. And so does the lady who used to sit here. She knows all. I know the difference.
It's interesting. She was married maybe from some congregation. He was Orthodox and he left. He joined there. She stayed here. She has a big afraid of it. He's thinking because she was living in So she knows.
I'm just like a sheep in the dark.
I remember a lot of details, but I don't remember years. I remembered a lot of details, but I don't remember the years. Oh, you keep coming in, I don't. And I'm not gonna remember. You could have, you took notes, you went home and studied it, you know. So this is what.
If she tells us something, it isn't he knew it before she said it. Same for the rabbi. If the rabbi says in 1900, blah, 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 he knows what happened, but he didn't know what happened. He memorized it. I don't know how people put that in their brain. I mean, how much room have you got? You know, there's so much stuff in there.
So sorry, that way for today. You're ready to blow up.
No, if I ask him, what did the rabbi mean? What did the rabbi, do you think the rabbi's telling the truth? Oh, yeah, it's the truth. I don't think the internet is 100%.
My husband remembers everything. Everything. And me, no, not so much. So,
Scary, there's some people who remember the day something happened. So, oh, you were born on a Tuesday.
yeah, usually those are people with special
Yes, right.
needs. So,
Special connections.
yes, special connections. Good morning, everybody. Today, I am subbing in for Rabbi Schuldenfrei, who has been on a civil rights trip with members of the congregation. I think that he won't be able to start until 2 weeks from now. So I'm glad to be here. Speaking of things to remember, let's start with saying the blessing for learning. The last 3 words are la'asok b'divrei Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So let me tell you something that I feel like it was a gift to me that I was going to come and teach here today, because I was doing some research on what to teach, because I don't really have any more Israel pictures to show you or anything of great importance that I need to share with regard to that. So I thought that I would go back and close with the ethics that we've been discussing. And I have been a rabbi for 40 years, almost 41 years. And what I'm teaching you today in part of this is something I learned while doing the research for this class. There are a couple of different texts that are Talmudic texts, but are distinguished on their own. And I discovered as I was getting ready to teach this class that there's one called Derech Eretz. So what does Derech Eretz means? It means to be a decent person. Like human decency is Derech Eretz. So, like a person of the soil is basically what it is. Like, be a real person. So I feel like it's a blessing for me, because I found so many things I'd never ever seen before, and some that I have. So I'm going to share them with you today. I have a few sheets to give out to you, and we'll be sharing them together, but not all at the same time. So would somebody like to? Thank you. So this is the first one. This is the second one.
Okay.
And then we have a third one that I guess we could pass out a little bit later on. Okay. So before you look at this, I know folks, before you look at this, let me introduce what we're going to, I should never pass that stuff out. So we're going to talk today, we're literally going to talk because I'm going to ask you for input about what are good everyday things that we should think about with regard to being people of Derech Eretz, common decency, which means having a kind of an idea enough to know what you should do and what you should think about not doing. And some of them are very, very normal life things. But we're going to start with these two guys, Rabbi Akiba and Rabbi Kahana. And let's see. Helen, would you like to read the first paragraph?
I think the other one. That's okay, I'll just. Rabbi Akiba once followed his teacher.
We're on the first paragraph. Go, start again.
Rabbi Akiba once followed his teacher, Rabbi Yeshua, into the outhouse. and there learn 3 things. When relieving oneself, one may not turn to the east or the west. One must undress sitting down. One never wipes oneself with the right hand, only the left. Rabbi Ben Azai heard about this and said to Akiba, "How did you dare take such liberties with your master?" Akiba replied, "This too is Torah, and I need to learn it."
So this is in the Talmud, and there are lots and lots and lots of discussions about appropriate ways to use the facilities that were outside in those days. And now let's move on to the second one, which is very well known, and Joette wants to read it, I know.
Rabbi Kahana entered his master's bedroom to hide under his bed. He heard his teacher laughing with his wife as they made love. Suddenly, his teacher realized that someone else was in the room and said, "Kahana, is that you? Leave. You are rude. Have you no sense of decency?" Kahana replied, "This too is Torah, and I need to learn it."
So, what do we have? We have 2 examples of something. Would you call these 2 examples derech eretz, common decency? No, not at all. They're exactly the opposite of common decency. Who the heck wants to be followed into a toilet? And especially, who the heck wants to be listened to under a bed when they think that they're having privacy with their spouse? So these are 2 things that come out of the Talmud. It's in Breshit Blessings, and it comes out of the Talmud and talks about these 2 guys. And what's the excuse that they give? Let me just explain that, which is that when we say Torah, we're not just talking about the 5 books of Moses. It means direction, life direction. And so all of us on a day-to-day basis, if we're learning something important about life, from a Jewish perspective, that's also Torah. And obviously we can find most of all of those things in the 5 books of Moses: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, because it's all about real life. This is in the Talmud. But all sorts of discussions of these kinds show up in the Chumash, in the 5 books. And they are saying, we have to learn Torah. So what does that mean, to say we have to learn Torah, even though every single person who would ever comment on this would say, this is the exact opposite of derech eretz, of common decency, right? So just so that you know, they excused it for themselves because they felt that these 2 people, these 2 rabbis, were the only people who had the importance and godliness to be able to teach them life issues. So what is more a life issue than these kinds of things? However, what comes to pass is that, as you just saw, somebody's going to say, no, just no. You can't find out these kinds of things. So what I want to talk with you about for a little bit, did I give you this one? Hold on a second, please. What's on the back? Nothing's on the back of that. Oh, okay. So let's go to Rav Huna. Okay. So now we're going to have a third thing where a father is facing his son and listening to his son, because his son was in the house of learning, and the father was also a rabbi, and he was in the house of learning, so he's kind of like eavesdropping on his son, who comes to a conclusion that he doesn't agree with. And so the question is, one of the questions is it okay for this father to just kind of listen in on his son and then challenge him? But in this particular case, is it okay for the father, once knowing something, to actually say to the son, I listened to you, and do you really think this? So will somebody read the Rav Huna one? Okay, Zisel, you're sitting right here. Right, read it.
Which one?
Rav Huna,
From the top?
that one, from the top.
Okay. Let me face the class.
Okay, good.
Rav Huna said to his son Rabbah, what is the reason that you are not to be found among those who study before Rav Hizda, whose halachot are incisive? Rabbah said to him, for what purpose should I go to him? When I go to him, he sits me down and occupies me in mundane matters, not related to Torah. For example, he said to me, one who enters a bathroom should not sit down immediately and should not exert himself excessively, because the rectum rests upon 3 teeth, the muscles that hold it in place, and there is concern lest the teeth of the rectum dislocate through exertion and he come to danger. Rav Huna said to his son Rabbah, he is dealing with matters crucial to human life, and you say that he's dealing with mundane matters. Now that I know what you meant, all the more so go before him.
Okay, so he listened, he saw that his son wasn't going to the classes. He was ditching the classes of Rav Hizda, just to say that they did that in the old days as well. So he ditches the class, and he says, when his father faces him, now we're also talking about common decency from another place, right? We're going to see what that other place is. The kid says, why should I go to his classes? All he talks about is stuff that doesn't matter. Obviously, he didn't say it quite like that in Aramaic or whatever he was talking, but what does it matter? I really want to learn Jewish law. And all he talks about is like how you shouldn't strain yourself when you're on the toilet. They didn't have toilets, so, on the outhouse. So what does his father say? That's part of the importance of life skills. That's important. If you think that law, Jewish law, is only about like how you sell a cow, or how you deal with murder, or how you deal with certain things that you grow, or money that you owe to other people, or whatever else it is that shows up with, or war, you're wrong. Because what you need to start to learn are things that also come from personal responsibilities. How do you treat your body? How do you go forward in life being willing to understand? And what does he say? Things that are crucial for human life. So basically, what the kid is doing and saying, medicine and bodily care are irrelevant. Why should I go and listen to somebody talk about that? And instead, now his father says, going to that class is what? Yeah, common decency. Learn how to be a person who understands how people function. So what's the difference between these two guys, Rabbi Akiba and Rabbi Kahana, and what Rabbi Huna is saying to his son Rava about going to class? Is there a difference? Okay, what's the difference?
The difference is how you learn about everyday, as he called it, mundane matters. You don't necessarily invade someone's privacy to learn how to go to the bathroom or how to make love, but you can go to a lecture that talks about it and learn from that.
So, the two guys who didn't have common decency weren't wrong in what they wanted to learn. They were just dead wrong in how they chose to do it. So the information that's coming to us is, yes, these things matter. All of these kinds of things matter. Even learning how to make sure that you do the right thing when you're taking care of your body, right? But in a different kind of way, not in a privacy-provoking kind of way. So I have one more thing that I'm going to tell you, and then I have a question to ask you. So this is a later text. Rabbi Leib, the son of Sarah, who said, I didn't travel to my master, the Maggid of Mezerish, in order to hear Torah from him. You don't have that. I have that. But to see how he laces his shoes. So we learn that people go to learn for different things, and some of them have a clear understanding that even daily things mean something, and some people don't. Some people think it's only got to be the huge things. But this, with regard to common decency, has to be done in a particular way. So this is what I want you to think about for a minute. We all live in homes, and probably even if we are living independently now, or we are single or whatever it is, we probably at one time in our life or more actually shared a place with other people or somebody else. Think back in time if it's not happening right now. What would be some basic things in your home? So we're not talking about derech eretz. I'm not going to sue somebody who doesn't really need to be sued, right? I'm not going to try to take away funds from somebody just because I don't like them. These are things that are every day in our lives. What are some things that people could do differently in their homes and in their lives that sometimes people don't think about at home that might bother somebody else? That knock on the door before you go into a bathroom. Somebody else could be there using it. Good start. What else? Why don't you say it in?
You should be aware of what tone you use when you speak to other people in your household.
Okay. So, tone, what tone you use when you speak to other people in your household. We do have a little bit more about that we might get to today. Think of other basic things that we don't think about, we don't really pay attention to, but Nada.
Maintain
way
keep privacy of I don't know, emails, your partner and his private things, not to intrude in his private.
All right. If the mail comes or the email or whatever it is, allow the privacy to the person whose things those are, and don't invade their privacy.
Telephone people before you drop over.
Telephone people before you just drop over at their house. It's fascinating because two of these things so far show up in these rabbinic texts. Not telephone, but you may see.
Be very careful of the tone of your voice when you speak those around you.
Okay. Be careful with the tone of your voice when you speak with those around you. Think lower. Think. Okay.
Never enter a home uninvited.
Okay, we've got make a phone call and don't enter a home uninvited.
Say please and thank you to other people in your home when they do something.
Okay. Say please and thank you to people, even if they're a person you're with all the time or you live with. Oh, come on, there's some really basic things. Gentlemen, you must be able to think about one or two of them.
Oh, thank you. I love that. I don't agree, sorry, with everything because I'm one of 6 children. We were a very small place, 6 children. And I would never think to call my mother or my bubby before I went to their house. I just go to the house and knock the door. It's my family. I want to just be able to be comfortable to walk in.
I don't know whether they're referring to that. They're referring to like friends and things like that. You know, I think that that's more like it because people used to live really close to their families and you'd go in and out of people's homes and things like that. It's a different story.
If there are things that you are aware of with the preferences that people you live with, you should be aware of those preferences. You know, if somebody likes to shut the lights when they leave the room, then shut the lights when you leave the room. You know, just little things that the other people in the household might care about.
Bridget, can you get a little closer?
My husband taught me to close drawers after I opened them.
Okay. All right, folks. Who uses toothpaste and doesn't cap it back up? Oh, who wanted to say something? Susan. Okay. What? Lower the toilet seat. Okay. And I was saying cap the toothpaste if that bothers somebody. Okay, well there you go. So all I'm trying to say to you as we discuss this question of derech eretz, basic respect, right, for other people. It's not just global huge things, it's what we do. So if you are living with somebody or you're the one who drops all your clothes on the floor at the end of the day and the other person feels uncomfortable that things aren't being hung up, that is a question of common decency. And I love it that our tradition starts with those things because Well, why? Why is it important that we start with these kinds of things rather than global kinds of things, which obviously, and okay, take care of your own house before you try to fix the world. Did you have anything else, Cecil? Go for it.
If you take care of the small details, like saying thank you or picking something up without being asked to do, you are on the way to do good things. If you don't, you do bad things.
So things pile up when you are not conscious of yourself and other people. When you're not conscious of those small things, it can turn into bigger things. So let's see, just let me go on. I'm looking where I want to go now. Okay. We've done this. Okay. So we have a community now. And all of us live within some kind of community. Sometimes we live in a friendship community, sometimes we live in a synagogue, or in the wider world, a church community. We hopefully have relationships beyond the immediacy of our room, our house. We have those relationships beyond that. And one of the things that comes up in the book, this comes up in the book of Genesis, is it's not good for people to be alone. Now, that doesn't mean that sometimes in our lives we live alone, but it means that in our lives we should seek to connect with other people. Being at MID is seeking to connect with other people. And there are numerous other ways that you've done it. And we are told religiously, not religiously like all the time. I mean, I'm talking about actually religiously. We are taught in Judaism that we need to be social beings. We are told from the creation in the Garden of Eden that we need to be social beings, that we can't just do things on our own the way we see fit, but we have to be able to engage with a community. So, Rabbi Hillel said that we should not separate ourselves from community. Did I give that to you? No, I didn't. Okay. So Hillel says you can't separate yourselves from community. But one of the things that's really problematic in the time in which we now live is that people do shy away from community, sometimes not deliberately, but because everything we do is technological. So if you have a computer and you're sitting at it a lot of the time rather than actually engaging with other people, that does away with derech eretz, with common decency, because common decency indicates that you're actually engaging with another person, a person whose habits you might not always like, or a person you might not always agree with, but you are actually engaging with a person or people. So now, if you take a look at younger generations of people in our society, they're really not always in a society. They are often only moved by what their limited experience of discussion or learning is. So one of the things about derech eretz that comes up in these texts, these ancient texts that don't have any computers, that don't have any iPads, that don't have any TVs, that probably didn't really even had no newspapers, and all of those things didn't exist. But the same issues exist. Don't close yourself away. And one of the things that they also say is don't close yourself away from people that you might not always agree with. And boy, do we live in a world where people do that. So one of the things about Derech Eretz is learning how to be with humans. And humans can sometimes leave the toilet seat up or not cap the toothpaste or throw their clothes on the floor if they're in your household or do whatever those things are. And people around us, sitting in this very room, may do some things that aren't necessarily things that we would always do. However, to have common decency in a world, you need to know how to flow with things that aren't necessarily always yours. So that's one thing that comes out of this. So yeah. Okay, do you want to? Okay, why don't you read it then? Now these are going back to human things. Oh, this isn't going to work. I'll try the other one. You know something? This is all the way around the table. It's not there? Yeah. It is there. Ta-da! There you go.
He who enters a bathhouse should first remove his cloak, then his shoes, then the trousers, then the shirt.
Go on, down at the bottom.
He who is about to enter a bathhouse should respect the one who is about to leave, and the one who is about to leave, a privy, should respect the one who is about to enter.
Okay, so that's not in your house. That is in the ancient community, right? Because the ancient community you didn't have a shower or a bath to go to. You had to go to a common place. And when you went to that common place, you had ways that you had to function in the community. Now, you could be really selfish in the community and get to that hot bath that you wanted to be in and go, I'm not getting out of here. I'm going to read a book, something like that. Or whatever they did. But what we're being told in Jewish law is it doesn't matter. If you're at home, start to develop a common decency. If you go out, start to develop a common decency. And for them, it was, if you're going and you're bathing yourself, think about the fact that somebody else might be waiting to go too. Or particularly with the privy, somebody else might be really waiting to go too. So that's why we're told this as a matter of responsibility. So now let's take a look a little bit out into the community. And let's talk about places we might go. Let's talk about when we are in a car, or when we are at a grocery store, or when we are at anywhere that you can think about, when we go to a dinner here at the synagogue. What are ways that we should be paying attention to Derech Eretz, to common decency when we are out in the world? Now, I know you can think about a ton of things that are not common decency when we are out and about. So anybody got any ideas? Don't cut into a line. That's true. Don't cut into a line. What line would you be in? Okay, going to the movies, going to the theater, going in the grocery store, if people are in line for the grocery store. Those are things that we see people do all the time. And I feel like I feel when I'm in those situations, and you probably do too, like turning around and going, huh? You know, why? Why are you doing that? Okay, so who's got something else? Nadia will take this right after. Go ahead. Speak loudly into the
Yeah.
mic.
The story happened to me. I was in Israel. My son was about 8 years old. We spent, my wife and I, late wife and I and my son, we spent a month in Israel. We are at a museum, can't remember which one, and we are in line like everybody else, minding, and I noticed out of the corner of my eye, this guy that was in the back, he kept on jumping a line and jumping in line and jumping in front of people, and as long as it didn't bother me, I said nothing. But he made a mistake of getting in front of me. Now, he did not understand English, and I cannot speak Hebrew, but I ranked them out, and he knew exactly what I was telling him. He went to the back of the line.
Okay. So just so, Susie, I'll get you right. Well, actually, 1 and 2, just a second. Somebody told me that at dinner this last Friday night about the same thing happening in Israel to him years and years ago. So let me just tell you, now, nobody does that. Nobody does that. There's a door that's open, the person will go like that and let somebody else in. It's amazing what happens when you have to understand how much people count.
Sorry.
That's okay, Maggie.
When driving, allow other people to change the lanes.
Okay.
And
Okay. When driving, allow other people to change lanes if they need to. In other words, don't speed up and go, you're not getting in here. Okay, Susie. Same thing? Driving. Okay. Anybody here can chime in.
When you're waiting in line to park, cars going out, you're going to take the space, and someone tries to...
Closer to your mouth.
When you're waiting to park in, let's say, Costco, and the car goes out, you've been patiently waiting, and somebody comes from the other direction and wants to get in, that's not nice.
Okay, stealing a parking space. There's a country song that has that in it. I guess it happens to a lot of people. So I think you get the gist of this. We start with the idea of common decency. Where does that begin? Literally, at home. And then after that, we need to be aware. Is our response to something worthwhile or not worthwhile? Is our decision that we want to get into that whatever it is we're going and we don't care where anybody else is that all that important when we're thinking about the idea of common decency? I know that you could think of so many other things, and you probably will after you leave here today think of some other things. Anybody else have an idea? This is going to just be the life of me. What's wrong with you, microphone? Have you no common decency?
People sometimes stand in the aisle of a grocery store on their cell phone talking to somebody and you can't get past them either way. So put the phone away and go shopping.
Okay, yes, one more, and then we move on. What time is it?
Just a minor thing, but I have a self-driving car, and it lets cars in that want to cut in.
Wait, say that again?
I have a self-driving car, and when somebody wants to change lanes, it lets them in.
Oh, what a lovely machine you have. Yeah. Okay. So let's, you've already said what is next on my list. You should never enter a friend's house suddenly. If one enters a house by invitation, whatever the host tells you, you must do. This is one of the things that comes out of Jewish texts. So in other words, they come to your house, they come to your house, they're supposed to follow your plan. You go to their house, it's their party, it's their way, and you need to back off if you're a person who, really has ideas about how things should go, so that they can have their own house to choose about. So, one of the things that they talk about in this text is if you want to keep friends, you have to accommodate them sometimes. And sometimes it's really hard to do. But I think underlying for all of us, we know that we have friends and we care about people, but they're not always exactly the same way we are. So how many people here have a very good friend that they've had to accommodate because they're a little different? Anybody? Okay. So what they gave as an example in this moral virtues is, have you ever, throughout the course of your life, in order to accommodate a friend, watch people's interminable travel slides or videos? Yeah. Or hear about endless adorable antics of our friends' children or grandchildren? I mean, I think that always happens, and I think that we could be those people too, right? I mean, I just troubled you with 2 weeks of Israel trip, so but so I think that these are the kinds of things. So here's what the Vilna Gaon. He was an amazing scholar in Poland, said, and it's kind of cryptic, but listen: be not like a doorpost, which can injure the face by crashing into it, or like the door jamb, which can hurt the legs and ultimately falls, but be like a doorstep that everyone treads on but remains in place even if the whole building collapses. So, if we have common decency, derech eretz, we're polite, we're affable, we're helpful, we don't go around figuratively bumping into others, either physically or emotionally. We think about how we deal with other people in certain instances. Now, the truth comes up in a Yiddish phrase that I'm not going to say in Yiddish because even though I studied it, it's not that easy for me. It's harder to stay on good terms with people than with God. So, why would he have said that? You don't know what God's thinking. Also, you don't get a direct response from God. And God comes up through our souls, right? Through our minds, through our hearts. We have times in our life where we want to communicate with God, but it's also blended with who we are, right? But it's not that way. It's not that way with friends. So, then there's another one. There was a person in Poland who said, it's interesting how people are very careful not to swallow an insect, but not at all careful about devouring a person. So what does that mean? You can be nasty to somebody. You can treat them poorly. I mean, come on, folks. We've all had people in our lives that we just couldn't tolerate. That's a good way to put it. Couldn't tolerate it. Or stand? Yeah. I mean, nobody goes through an entire life without encountering somebody like that. But nonetheless, sometimes we have a reaction to just be, like nasty, or, want to chase somebody away. And that is considered a problem because we have in the book of Leviticus, love your neighbor as yourself. So this is part of it. So now, here's another part. You would think that only in our generations would people have had rules about how you dress as a matter of common decency, derech eretz. But interestingly enough, there is a ton written about it in the Talmud. So here's one. Rabbi Yochanan admonishes his disciples, a Torah scholar who leaves grease on his clothes deserves death. He doesn't really mean it that way. But what he's saying is, what do you think he's saying?
Wipe that grease off before you come.
Yeah, you have, what role does a scholar have to play? Is to show an example. To show the example isn't just what you say or what laws you follow, but how you set an example for what somebody should do. Now, obviously, that rabbi is not going to say to a person who works in a vineyard or to a person who works with oil, don't show up with grease on your clothes, because that would be unfair to the person and not commonly decent to somebody whose job it is to be involved in things that might cause you to be dirty. But they would say to the person, as they do say in some of these texts, but when you are done with your tasks, go wash and face other people in the best way that you can. Now, why do you think, okay, once, this kind of reminds me of people in our young people in our generation. Once when Rabbi Hanina visited Rabbi Judah, the patriarch, he came out to greet Hanina in his linen undershirt. And Hanina said, "Go back and put on your woolen overcoat." And the guy had come out wearing his linen undershirt in order to be casual. It even says so in the rabbinic text. But the other guy is saying, come on, you're dealing with other people. Look well put together. You don't like that idea? Okay, so it was okay with you if he came out with the linen shirt. But it was thousands of years ago. You have no idea what a linen shirt actually was supposed to be. Let me ask you this. why is it that they actually have an idea that people need to also think about not only their clothes, but about their cleanliness and the way that they place themselves in society. Any ideas why that might be? And then we'll close up for today. Clothes up for today. Any? Joette?
After the Grammys, the biggest news that came across TV and internet was that Kanye West and his wife showed up at the Grammys. She wore a fur coat. She took off the fur coat and was wearing a completely sheer dress with no underwear. And this made the news because it was so outlandish, outrageous, so out of decency from what people would expect when you show up to a public event of that sort. So, I mean, and it was reported that he said to her, let's put on a show or something like that. And so I think there are...
Well, he's a person who does swastika t-shirts.
Yes, I mean, that came afterwards, but I'm just saying that the idea that she was standing there in a completely sheer dress with no underwear had an effect on many, many people. Whereas, excuse me? I mean, she's a beautiful woman, but she's practically standing there naked. So I think that in society, we expect a minimum from other people. Obviously, if you're going to one event as opposed to another event, the dress code might be different. But, I mean, I'm going to the BJE Gala on Sunday night, and all of a sudden I thought, what's the dress code for that? I'm not going dressed like this. There are certain norms that we expect of people as far as what you're wearing, whether or not you look clean, et cetera, depending on where you're going and who you're with.
So one of the things that's really been very difficult, is that over the generations, things like this have changed drastically. And people who are young people in this generation have a very, very different perspective about what is appropriate attire and what isn't. I was looking at some old pictures from Disneyland the other day, and when people went to Disneyland in 1955 or 60 or 63 or 70 or whatever it was, they would go dressed nicely to Disneyland. As a matter of fact, a number of women were wearing gloves and hats, and men were wearing jackets, and it was a special day, so they wore special clothes. Well, you wouldn't see anything like that at Disneyland or mostly anywhere now. So it's okay when things change. What's not okay for the idea of common decency is for people to just do these things however they see fit without ever thinking that there might be somebody else around them. So I'll close today with that idea, and I will say to you what Rabbi Hillel said when somebody was becoming Jewish back in thousands of years ago. He said, "What is hateful to you do not do to another. That is the entire Torah, and the rest is its interpretation. Go study. So dealing with this topic today and saying that certain things are Torah, which is our holy books, they're not always just the things that are written down, that are things that, laws that we should do. It's how to be a decent human. So thank you for being here today, and it was lovely to spend the time with you. And all of you are all delightful. So thank you very much.
Oh, were we supposed to give those back? I'm sorry.
Oh, you can keep them if you like.
Sorry, I folded it.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Disneyland and I were born in the same year.
You don't look a day older than the oldest brother.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Cecil, I love your hat and jacket.
You know, actually, Rabbi, it was coincidental. I did not buy one at the other same time. It happens that I like this jacket. Actually, my son gave me this many years ago. And then I like this hat very much. It turns out it's a perfect match.
Perfect. And don't forget to wear it for,
St. Patrick's Day.
yes, St. Patrick's Day.
Do you realize that it's St. Patrick's Day, and then becomes All Saints Sunday?
It becomes, oh.
Saint Sunday.
You know, I grew up in New York. And whether it was, I don't remember so much from the Bronx because I was only 11 when we moved to Queens. But I remember being in Queens. If we were going to go to Manhattan, we would dress differently. Just to go into the city. I mean, that was a thing.
wish I were still in Israel. It was the best thing ever. Really was. Best thing ever. I have friends who live in Sonoma, that I saw when I was there. Spent time with them when I was there, when we were there. And they live in Sonoma, and they made Aliyah, about a year ago. And their intention was to,
After October 7th.
I think before. Their intention was to live in Tel Aviv at least half the year, and then they have a place that they were building in Sonoma. But all of their children now, even these 3 sons that served in the IDF as Hayalim Redim, and 2 of them who went back twice during this, they're all living in the United States. So she feels more pulled to be in the United States, even though they're now Israeli citizens as well. So, but they go every couple months, they go back and forth. So there's a piece of me that would very much like to do that.
I don't see myself going every couple of months, but I would like to get there more. I've got to figure out the best way to do that.
I mean, it might be nice to go with somebody and but if you have things that you want to volunteer on, there are new things now
Yeah,
to do.
right. I mean, JNF is still doing what they were doing,
Yeah.
and the group that you volunteered with.
Leckett. Yeah,
Leckett.
Leckett's always doing things.
Yeah, so
But
there's always
you
something.
could probably also, when you decide to go, they'll probably still be refurbishing Miriam, and, she was here, one of the people, so it was really, 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 really worthwhile. So, yeah, I just want to get on a plane and go back.
It's common courtesy